here's a basic introduction to macros. So basically what a macro is, it's a box that we can put some code into to be pulled out and looked at later. So a couple of rules for defining macros here is we have to define the macro before we can call it. We have to put the code in the box before we can pull it out of the box and look at it. And you have to start and end a macro with these two statements here. The %mend finishes the macro, and then %macro begins the macro, and then you have to name it something. I call this one rangen because we're going to randomly generate some uniform random variables. And then I have this basic do loop that should belong inside a data step, but instead I put it inside this macro here to be pulled out later. So it's sort of like a honey-do list that you tack onto the refrigerator, but your husband doesn't look at it until the weekend or until you say, honey, please. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start out data new, that's our data step, and then we call the macro, that's our honey, please, and then SAS actually looks at the honey-do list that's up here, things for him to do. He has to do this, create the random uniform numbers. And then we can print it out in this prog G chart just to look at it so you can see what happened. And so there's our uniform random numbers. So if you want to think about it this way, this is the way that SAS is thinking about this. It says data new, and then it goes through the do loop, and then it runs its prog G chart. That's essentially what it's doing. Here's another program. It's kind of the similar thing. You don't have to have the whole do loop in there. You can put whatever lines of code you want to inside a macro. Just know that when you call the macro, it's going to run through all the lines of code that you put in the macro. So if I put these two lines of code in the macro, then it's going to run through data new, and then it's going to do x equals 2 to 4 by 0.01. So right now x is 2, and then it's going to go through this function up here, and then it'll make this y equals this function and output it to a data set, and then it'll go to the next value, 2.01, and then it'll run through the y equals and get another y, and then end, and so on and so forth. So it's going to run through this and create this function essentially, and then I'm gonna, when I run this prog G plot, I'm gonna do this symbol 1 I equals join. In other words, my interpolation, I want SAS to go ahead and draw a line from dot to dot to dot. So this is the resulting function. It gives us this nice curve that we invented.